Mr. Treasurer, I'd like to call us to order at 4:04 p.m. Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown? Here. Mr. Cole? Mr. Green?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Here. And Mr. Ragland?
Here.
You have the quorum.
Thank you. Our meeting minutes from the last meeting were sent to you by email. There should also be a copy of the meeting minutes in your packet. I'd like to give you a moment to review those. If there are any objections or any corrections necessary, please make those known at this time.
I move approval.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the meeting minutes from the December meeting of the Finance and Appropriations Committee. Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
I wasn't at the meeting last, so I was staying.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes. Do we, may I ask a question? Do we need to abstain because we weren't at the meeting?
I've never been asked that
I don't
question
think
in
so.
42 years.
I don't think so, because you're just saying that
Jack asked me, and I thought, I've not been asked that question
Yeah.
either. I think it's fine. But-
For what it's worth, I tend to do that.
Oh,
At meetings, I'm not,
okay, then I will abstain, then you abstain.
Okay, Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
yes,
And that passes.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Treasurer. Mr. Bihork, are you now prepared to present your financial report for the month of January?
I am.
Please
Thank you very
proceed, sir.
much. This is the monthly financial report for the month ending December 31st, 2019. It will be reviewed here and then taken to the board next Tuesday. Last month, total revenues came in about $900,000 over plan on $34 million estimated. We're now standing at about $7.8 million over plan, which is about a 2% variance on a total of $458 million in the plan. Hello, Mr. Cole. Total expenditures this month, or last month, came in about $800,000 under plan against $74 million planned for the month. And year-to-date, we stand about $16 million under plan on $458 million estimated. The year-to-date variance has been declining over the last couple months, and I'll mention something about that primarily in the area of personnel when we get into some of the details. As a result of those variances, ending cash balance remains about $23 million over plan at $253 million. Highlights for the revenue side, under state aid, we came in about $1.8 million under plan. Year-to-date, we stand at $6.2 million under plan. And you know that because the plan did not anticipate how the school wellness and success funds, did I say that right? Is it school wellness and success funds? Yes. Yeah. We weren't anticipating how that was going to be handled. That is put into a separate fund, and we didn't adjust our plan. We'll end that year around $11.8 million under plan, but those dollars are over in a separate fund. Last month, we had a variance in the restricted federal grants line, very small one. Yeah, it's a couple $100,000 line item, but that was timing. We thought it would come last month. It came this month, so that variance went away. In other revenues, very similar to last year, we are running above plan. $2.5 million this month, primarily due to a $1.4 million receipt of pilot payments. I told you before, pilots were running a little bit behind historical timing, but we got a payment. So those are hard to figure out when they're going to come in, but we got $1.4 million this month over what was estimated. Investment income, again, over plan by about $719,000. So other revenues are now running $6 million above plan year to date. Just pictorially what's going on. The two largest sources of revenue, property taxes and state aid, account for about 90% of our year-to-date revenues. And if you combine those two, the variance is 0.31%, or about $1.3 million on $420 million. I think that's pretty good, but we'll see how it goes. That's going to change, as state revenue continues to fall behind plan. When we break down all other revenues, you'll see that the other revenues of all these other categories kind of sticks out. And I explained where those variances, what the source of those variances is. This is just the plot of variances to give you an idea. Remember, I use 5 million or 5% plus or minus to be an indicator of high and low, the one that stands out. State aid is now on a dollar amount considered a high variance. And then as you can see, all other revenues jump off the page a bit. This chart, because I can't help myself with changing or doing something different each month, I decided that I would highlight in the left-hand column the category titles. If it's green, it's a favorable variance. If it's red, it's an unfavorable variance. On the revenue side, favorable means over plan. Later on, when you see expenditures, the green favorable means we're under plan. So, and that's strictly from an accounting sense, not from a behavioral sense. We could be way under on expenditures if we just stopped teaching third grade. You know what I mean? If we stopped doing something. All right, so that it's not addressing behavioral. This is strictly financial, favorable and unfavorable to our plan. I also note for you with an asterisk a couple of categories that changed either from low to high or high to low. So you can see in state aid, we are now high, that is more than 5 million in a variance in a dollar amount, but still low from a percentage standpoint. And then all of the revenues now are both high in variance amount, where they were low last year, and also high in percentage variance. So, and restricted federal grants went back to low in both categories. That $200 and some thousand, when it came in, it changed the variance percentage back to low. When we move on to expenditures for December, our biggest line item, personnel, we ran 2.1 million over for the month, and we're now 4.8 million under year to date. So if you look at that, we were around 7 million previously under plan year to date, and now we're down to 4.8. That represents just 1.6% variance on that line item. When we break that down into salaries and wages versus benefits, you'll see that on salaries and wages, year to date, we're within $1.7 million. And that's on about 211 million in expenditures. So that's a 0.8% variance. On the benefits side, we're running 3 million under plan year to date. That's on about 87 million, a much smaller amount on expenditures. So that represents 3.4. So when you combine those, you get the 1.6 variance overall. We'll be watching this pretty close. I think this is about the closest we've ever been on the personnel side when it comes to salaries and wages. So we'll see how that pans out in the coming months. And Scott and I are watching and waiting to see how these expenditures run relative to our appropriation, which is different than our plan. Our appropriation is our statutory authority that the board approves for us to spend. And as we see whether we're going to meet or exceed that appropriation, we may have to make an adjustment. But that's something that we're going to watch. We're not there yet, but we'll watch it. And as you know, we do make certain adjustments in the month of June to close the books. On the purchase service side, it continues to run under plan. There's another million under plan this month, 8.2 million year to date. Again, Scott and I working together took a look at one particular line item. That's professional technical services. And we know that there are three budget areas, budget areas, I guess is the way to put it, that have underspent this one line. And for your benefit, it's the I Know I Can budget, the school leadership budget, and the treasurer's office. So we, are in contact with those budget managers to make sure, and he's got a pretty good idea of, have they not encumbered something? Is it just timing and whatnot? So we've taken a good hard look at that. The others are property services, electricity, tuition. Those are items that we generally make sure we have enough budget, and if they run under in electricity, that's a good thing. It's not like we're not doing something in those categories. So we've got a pretty good handle on watching that variance line item. Community schools, no real significant change this month from previous months, and it's still running under plan. I do note in variances somewhere that the school foundation report shows around 211 to 213 million that's anticipated No, we have 211, 213 in the plan and appropriation, and we're around 200 million in that report that they are estimating will come out. That's about that $10 million difference, and if you remember in the November forecast, I said I pulled 10 million out of our budgeted line items for that going forward, so that seems to be holding true at this point as well. So you can see here, personnel and charter, our two largest expenditure areas. Again, I add those two big ones together, you get 90% of our year-to-date expenditures, and that's about a 1.4% variance, or a 6 million under plan on, over $400 million in expenditures. Looking at all the other expenditures, you can just see that purchase services is the most notable. We look at the variances here again. Personnel, for the first time, is low in dollar amount and percentage. You see it's 4.7, 4.8 million under, so it doesn't hit my $5 million threshold to be called high. Again, purchase services, dollar amount as well as percentage are high. The others are much smaller contributors overall to our expenses. Again, green is under, red is over. But as you can see in the largest expenditure areas, personnel and charter, we have low percent and dollar variances. The ones that changed, again, personnel went from high amount to low amount as that variance gets closer and closer to plan, and other uses jumped up to high. That's my summary for December. Revenues continue to be up. Expenditures are under plan. 23 million more in cash than what we anticipated. And that's it that we have for the month of December. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to address those if I can.
Are there any questions, committee? And thank you for folks who have got the opportunity to come in, including myself, a little late. Parent duties with parent conferences, so I apologize. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, Mr. Treasurer.
All right, an update for the committee on a small item from last month. As you may recall, I talked to you about how we posted the county auditor refund. We treated it this year as a reduction of a current year expense rather than a revenue item as being a refund of a prior year expense. I checked with my colleagues around the state, and I think I emailed all of you on that. And I also talked to the auditor of state, and there is a representative here from the internal auditor's office that has an opinion as well, if they'd like to share that at some point in time. Most of what auditors say is, be consistent and have a justification for why you do what you do. And that's kind of the response I got, and if Kevin wants to elaborate on that, that's fine. And my colleagues, though, somewhat in the majority treated it as we treated it in the past as a revenue item. A couple did what we did and treated it as a reduction of an expense. I'm somewhat non-committal on it, whatever the committee would like. I can handle the kind of the blip historically. It's, $1 million to $1.5 million variance in this whole picture. Consistency-wise would tell us to repost it as revenue. I think if I could borrow a term from you, Board Member Cole, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. What anybody thinks is more appropriate that you'd like to see. If we repost it, we repost it. If not, I think in the future, though, we'll just treat it as revenue if we get one next year. We don't know whether that'll happen or not. County auditors said they would do that, but I have no guarantee for that. So just want to give you that update. I did do that polling as requested and share those results with you. So hearing nothing, we'll just let sleeping dogs lie. Okay, good.
Best practices at this point, as per your recommendation. And
All right,
that was the
good.
sentiment
Thank you.
before, as I recall.
The next item on the agenda is an update or somewhat of a tutorial, if you will, on our budget forecast and appropriation process. kind of a refresher for those of you that have been on the committee and have been with the district for a while on how we work this through a process. Also, it'll be new to some new folks perhaps in the audience about how Scott and I work through this process. Part of this is mine, part of this is his, and one feeds into the other, as you will see. For us, typically, and you can start almost anywhere on this chart, but we'll start at the top. As you know, last November we prepared and adopted a 5-year forecast, and it's in November when you roll everything back a year. So you move the previous fiscal year from the first year of the forecast into history, and then you move 1 year out in the future into the forecast that typically had not been in the forecast before. So in November, we covered the time period of fiscal year 20 to 21, 22, 23, and 24 for that time period. You get to right about now, January and April, and Scott begins this budget prep cycle for the general fund and other funds. And working with all the departmental managers and budget managers in the district, we begin to do what we call budget prep. And they put together their 5-year budget document. Now, interestingly enough, because this budget prep is not for the current year, it's for next year, his 5 years are actually 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So he's a year ahead of me in terms of planning. All right, so that works out pretty well. That data then, we use that somewhat to do a May update. May update primarily is looking at where we are in current expenditures in the forecast, but also see if there's any changes in the budgets that they've prepared to feed into there. In June, Scott brings an appropriations resolution. In this business, we have a budget and we have appropriations. A lot of public entities just call it their operating budget. But in our parlance, it's called an appropriations resolution because you appropriate money for certain expenditures. We do that in June in anticipation of July 1 fiscal year start. From then June to the next few months, we have down here, we align the forecast with the appropriations, but we also look at other changes that occur. One of the first things that occurs, we end the fiscal year. So now we know what that fiscal year looks like at the end, so we plug those results in. Sometimes we hear magical things from Broad and High about the state budget, and so we have to factor that in after the summer. And there may be some other things that go on from an expenditure side that we want to consider. But then we just work our way back into a November 5-year forecast with the best data that we have at the time, and the cycle starts all over again. This is a chart that Scott and I put together some years ago. Hopefully you can see it, and didn't print all this out because I wanted to focus your attention on the screen. But we start at the bottom with when do we prepare these documents, so you can see that on the 5-year forecast time, starting about March, I may actually start next month, to prepare and compile data for the 5-year forecast. At the same time, Scott and the department budget managers are preparing their general fund budgets. The review process, which is all brought here to FAC, I bring the May update. This is working towards the May update. We bring that information to you in April. And in that March-April timeframe, we're also doing budget presentations for the 2021 budget and beyond from that perspective. I present to the board at the first board meeting in May, the forecast, and then the second board meeting we adopt it. Similarly, there'll be some budget presentations to the board in that May timeframe, but in June, we add in all the other funds besides general fund and bring that to the board for an appropriations approval. And the end result is we have an appropriation resolution for the next year, and we have a 5-year forecast for a similar period of time. Now, just from a timing perspective, I decided to go on and say, let's talk about what I present in the forecast and how does that relate to our long-term financial planning. Back in November, there are many, many slides in that presentation, but this is one of the first slides which compares what did we think that this time period looked like back in May of 19, the previous forecast, and what does it look like now in November? And I described to the board and to this committee what some of those changes are. But know this, that things change between May and November, and it's reflected in this forecast. I go further and I extend it out on a trending basis, another 3 years into 25, 26, and 27, for long-term planning purposes. And I add in here a line that says, this is our 30-day cash balance, because GFOA and others believe that a good planning or target for your cash balance is 30 days cash. I put that on there because oftentimes people look at a balance and say, well, you know, you're showing an $84 million deficit, so we only have to cover $84 million. Not true. We don't plan to zero. We should be planning to like $93 million. So that difference there is not 84 million, it's 100, close to 180 million difference that we need to plan for. Just giving you a very macro sense of how we want to look at these projections and balances in a long-term perspective. Some of the key kind of leading indicators or trigger points for reading this, you know, what should catch your eye? Well, the first one is, when do our expenditures begin to exceed our revenues? Graphically, that's demonstrated by the slope of that line, that cash balance line, going from positive, which would be building cash balances, to flat, meaning we break even, to negative, meaning we're eating into our cash balance. Once that turns south, that is a trend that is unsustainable, as you can imagine, even at home. Once you start spending more than you bring in, that's kind of unsustainable. And we actually have less, if no borrowing options compared to what you can do at home. We don't have, you know, credit cards and lines of credit here to manage with, so we can spend what we have in our checking account. The second thing to look at is, when do we drop below 30 days cash? Now, if we wait until there, you can see that the problem, the deficits, are pretty immediate. They're on the 1 to 2 year horizon, as opposed to when we turn and begin to spend more, we've got maybe a 3 or 4 year time horizon. And lastly, we always like to know, when's our first year of negative? I mean, when is that really going to come home to roost? It's also, when we do a forecast, where that first year of a negative balance is determines what kind of a response, if any, we get from ODE. We can have a negative balance in the 5th year and we don't get a letter. The closer it gets down to around 3 years, we get a letter and they kind of ask, what are you going to do about that? And then pretty soon, when you get to 2 years and 1 year in, we've got things like fiscal watch and fiscal emergency, which are much more formal declarations. So we don't want to be there, which is why I share things like this to say to you, when you look at my projection on cash balance, here are some signals that says we need to do something. Now, as with any other school district in the state of Ohio, to change the slope of that line or move it, you got three things you can do. You can increase revenues, you can decrease expenditures, or you can do a combo of each. So let's talk about levy timing a little bit. Just again, I want to share and let you all be on the same page. If we were to contemplate the next ballot that's available to us, which is November of 20, an opportune time for school districts in many cases, it's a presidential election, big turnout, bigger success rate. That happens to occur because these are fiscal years across the bottom. November of 20 is in fiscal year 21. So the first question I always ask is, or tell people is, voting in 20, in the middle of fiscal year 21, which fiscal years is this intended to fund? If you're on a 4-year levy cycle, you should pass something that should last at least 4 years, and then you come back. That's the cycle. So it's designed to focus on 22, 23, 24, and 25. So when we look to levy planning, notice that the forecast that we currently have only goes to 24. So if I didn't trend this, we wouldn't know what that longer-term picture looked like. And one might say, well, Stan, you've only got to cover 84 million, and you get some favorable variances over time organically. Can't you cover that? And my answer to that is, I'm not worried about 24. I'm worried about 25 and beyond, and how what we do today helps us mitigate some of that sharp decline in the future. So we're really looking at the 227 million. So we're here in January of 20, which is in the middle of the fiscal year 20, looking to November of 20, which is in the next fiscal year, to potentially have to address a $227 million deficit. And that's what we projected back in November, and certainly we'll update that in May. So just from a timing perspective, you can see why, for me, as I guess your financial advisor, I like to look long term. Fiscal 20 is in the books as far as I'm concerned. 21 is going to be determined by the budget, and that financially and revenue side, that's done. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. So since you got this long-term planning, let's talk about where we were in 16 and how did we do in 16. So in 16, November of 16, we were actually in fiscal 17. So in a like manner, that would be intended to fund 18, 19, 20, and 21. So how'd we do? Well, our projection is we'll end 21, not this year, but next year, we'll end 21, $200 million on hand. One might say, well, I think from a financial planning standpoint, pretty good. And we experienced a lot of different things then. Changes in state funding, the end result, we transferred some money over to cover our program. I mean, a lot of things happened during that time period that we didn't know about back in 16. So that looks pretty good. And in fact, the next couple of years, while declining, they're still positive. So as a result of what we did in 16, we've got those 3 years declining but positive. And now when we look out here, so when we're looking at 22, 23, 24, 25, what do we have to do now so that 3 years from now, those years look like those 3 years? In other words, 227 is comparable to 201 from a planning standpoint back in 21. The 398 negative in 26 is comparable to the 131 positive in 22. And the 592, this is all in millions, 590, that's in millions of dollars. That 592 is comparable to what was 36 million. So how do we shift that line up? And that's the planning process. So when you get around to talking about actual levy planning, this is how far out I'm looking. So the forecast is a good start, but it's not the complete picture. So from a levy standpoint, and again, very macro, just some gross numbers that kind of give everybody, how do you think about levy planning? And this kind of explains why I will say some of the things that I will say later on when we get to that. The columns on this are calendar years, or tax years, collection years. Property taxes are levied and collected on a calendar year basis. But fiscal years are July to June, so they cross 2 calendar years. So the shading groups your fiscal years. So this chart is designed to show you what happens when you vote in 20 to address a deficit here in 25. Strictly an example, and the numbers are even just because the math works fairly well. How many collection periods do you have until you get to that deficit? You got first half and second half of every year, and I count them off there. You've got 9 collection periods. From the time you vote to the time it starts to get collected, you have 9 till you get to your deficit. This is some of the math that we use to determine how many mills do you have to put on to cover that deficit. And again, this is just getting you to 0, not to your 30 days cash. So over on the right-hand side, in the bottom right-hand corner, you see if you've got a $200 million deficit, you got 9 collection periods, you got to collect $22.2 million per collection period. Okay, admittedly, it's not perfect 50-50. It's 52-48 or 54-40. It splits, but when you're at this level, just divide it by half and run, okay, from a planning standpoint. I double it to 44.4 to get what do I have to collect in a year, and we get about 10 million per mill. We actually get a little bit more, but again, the math works out pretty well. So if I got to collect 44.4 a year and I get 10 million per mill, then you're going to hear from me, you need to put 4.4 mills on the ballot. It's that simple. There's a lot more complicated to it, but I try and keep it that straightforward so that everybody can kind of understand the timing. And timing is key with a levy because one of the things that can happen is maybe you don't go in 20. Maybe you fail in 20. So what happens if everything stays the same? What is that in I'm not real good at Latin, but I think in economics it's called ceteris paribus. Is that right? The Latin specialist here. All other things being equal, so if nothing changes and something happens that we don't go in the fall of 20, what happens when you delay it? So the vote moves from 20 to 21. Now I'm down to 7 collection periods. Do the math. 200 divided by 7 is 28.6 times 2 is 57.1. You go from 4.4 to 5.7. So your millage goes up. So it becomes more of a burden to address that deficit the longer you wait or the longer events that are out of your control cause you to wait. close to the deficit, then you have to consider other things to do. That's how you get yourself into budget reduction type of situations. So, boom, I'm done. I can go back. But that's really it. That's our budget appropriations cycle. That's some indicators when you look at our cash balance. What are the leading indicators of an issue that we're going to have to address behaviorally? And then, how do tax levies work in terms of collection timing and addressing a deficit? So that's my story, Your Honor, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Something to that effect. But I hope that helps, because we are here in January. We do have a deficit in the most recent forecast. And I'm sure there'll be more conversations to be had. But I hope that's a pretty good primer for refresher as well as a primer for new people. So there you go. Thank you for that time.
I think it's an
indulging
outstanding
me.
one. Are there any questions at this point about this presentation? Mr. Ragland?
Yes, sir. Mr. Pahort, it's my understanding that you're on the agenda to present a report at Tuesday's board meeting. Will this portion of today's report be included in your presentation to the entire board on Tuesday?
It was not my original intention. My intention was to do strictly the monthly financial report.
Okay. Understanding that we have two new board members, and all of us could probably use a refresher, will you be devoting time to give this level of presentation regarding your forecasting to the other members of the board who aren't necessarily on the Finance and Appropriations Committee?
If that's the pleasure of the board, absolutely. As you can see, I'm ready to go anytime you folks are.
I guess I'm asking for Mr. Chairman's opinion on that. I would at least think that our new board colleagues would benefit from, if not on the board floor, but hearing how you go about the work that you're
Sure.
doing as soon as possible. But I'm open to hearing from my colleagues on that.
We've had conversation about this and are in total and full agreement. Total and full agreement.
So if you'd like me to do it Tuesday,
Yes,
as you can see, this is a singular PowerPoint presentation that rolls from one to the other. So if the pleasure of the committee, I will go forward. And if any of your colleagues are upset with how much time I take, I will just turn to you to defend me.
Well, yeah, that was one of the reasons why I'm really kind of bringing this up, because it was very succinct, and I want to congratulate you on it. And I do think coupled with the financial report that you did give regarding December, including this into a presentation on the board floor is something that we would certainly have time for, at
Okay.
least in my opinion. So.
And also, Stan, seeing presentations like this over time and around the state from different boards or two different boards, that was really well done. I just think you really distilled it down. That was,
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like our new treasurers in the state of Ohio could use that too. Just that explanation was really good.
Well, it's in the public domain now, so.
I noted that. It's
With
like,
that recommendation.
But hang on a minute. I was just going to say, where's that copyright symbol?
yeah.
I'm not so sure I can do that, but it would be an interesting thought, but no. Well, my dad was an elementary school principal, so he would probably appreciate the fact that I kept it elementary, if you will, so that's good.
All right, Watson. Are there any other comments? Okay, awesome. We can move forward to item number 4, self-sustaining funds update. Mr. Gooding?
Thank you. There we go. All right. I was trying to ad-lib a little bit. Thank you very much, Chair Cole. What we have before you this evening is just a little update, just a little bit of education. We spend a lot of time as a committee, as Stan very well went through what our processes are, and everything's been focused on the general fund. Our variances are on the general fund, the operating piece, because it is primarily driven by state foundation and property taxes. We talk about that a lot because that's the bulk of what we do. $900 million out of $1.5 billion is operating. But what we want to do here is take a brief moment to talk about 4 separate self-sustaining funds that we have. They are enterprise funds that are, if you want to think of operations that fund themselves. That's the self-sustaining piece. So the 4 that we have here that we wanted to talk about so you understood what they are, why they exist, what they do. The food service fund, the adult education fund, our Latchkey Fund, which is our before and after school programs, as well as WCBE, which is our Columbus City Schools is very fortunate to have our own public radio station. 89.5, where's Scott? So put it on, 90.5. To put that in your presets on your radio station. Maybe that's why, because it's just one of my presets. But those are there, so we've got these folks that manage these programs to come before you to kind of talk about them a little bit. I'll ask Joe to come up, but just a little bit what's here on the presentation is just obviously the very, very boring, dry stuff about what the statutory authority is. The purpose of this fund is to record financial transactions related to our food service operation. Joe does an amazing job. He didn't know I was going to do this, but our food service fund ended last school year with about $12.3 million in cash, which is phenomenal because in most school districts, your general fund or your operating fund is supplementing that to keep them out of the red. Joe does a great job in that. It's come a long way from years and years ago where we were doing that. And we're able to have a balance of $12.3 million where our students eat breakfast and lunch for free through the CEP program, which I'm kind of stealing your thunder now. But with that, I will turn it to
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe? No. But with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Joe to talk a little bit about the food service fund.
I only have 3 bullets, so I only have 2 more if you want to cover those. Thank you for having me. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Joe Brown. I'm the Director of Food Service. I'm responsible for this fund and this budget. As Scott said, one of the most important things we do, or the most important thing we do, is provide meals to our students, breakfast and lunch on a daily basis. 6 years ago, we started participating in a program called Community Eligibility Provision, which allows us to provide breakfast and lunch to all of our students at no cost to them on a daily basis. And that has been a huge driver of our success for a couple reasons. But I'm going to tell you the main one is prior to that time, we spent my leadership team spent a large percentage of their time focused on money, collecting money and funds, as well as applications for free or reduced price meals. When we shifted to this, that's no longer something we have to deal with. So now they spend their time on food quality and customer service. Change the whole dynamic of how we work and what we do in a positive way. As Scott said, for the past 5 years, we've contributed positively to our fund. We've ended the year at a positive place. And the largest driver of our financial outcomes is participation. We would like to say that we can flex quickly and we're very nimble to changes in demand. The fact is we're not as nimble as we would like to be. We're a big organization, and when we have changes in demand, it takes us a little time to catch up. Therefore, the easiest way to take care of that and to handle that is to make sure we have happy customers and to drive our participation. We historically and continually today benchmark in the top 25 percentile with the Council of Great City Schools for participation. We're always looking for ways to improve student satisfaction, be it menu changes, be it service related, to help keep our kids happy, because the happier we keep our kids, the better we do from a financial perspective.
So how do you get that feedback from the students?
Know how you are doing or whatever?
So a number of different ways. We do some things like surveys and feedback that we get, but people love surveys, and there's value in surveys. You have to keep in mind that that's what people want to do as opposed to what they will do. If you, this time of the year, if you go around and ask how many people are going to eat healthier this year, it's hard to find someone who's not going to raise their hand. But then in practice, what are they actually going to do? So we do surveys. We ask kids what they like, what they don't like, what they would like to see in the future, that sort of thing. We do student taste testings. Anytime we change something on our menu, we do taste testings with students in schools, collect their feedback to see what they think. And then the biggest thing we do is we analyze our participation and our data of what kids are taking. we typically change our menu. Our menu is our biggest driver of participation. We work on service, we work on a number of other things, but menu is the biggest driver. We historically change our menu twice a year. We change it at the beginning of the school year and then after the winter break. And when we do that, we'll look at our menu and we'll say, okay, what are the 10% on the bottom that are the slowest movers, 10 to 15%, and then we'll look for replacements for those. Sometimes we might keep something if it's on the bottom, if it's a unique alternative or something we think we need to give kids more time with. You try something new, they don't always gravitate toward it right away. They need to see it a little while. But our biggest driver, though, is looking at those numbers and what are the things that the students don't like, what do they like, and how do we provide a good balance. It can be a little challenging, though, because if you ask the kids, they'll have chicken nuggets and pizza every day. And that isn't what we want to provide in our meals, but we do want to make sure we have the options they like.
Mr. Brown, there's another question, Mr. Ragland.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So over the last 5 years, you said that the food service program has contributed in cash balance. How much is that in total? Do you have that number?
How much, well, our fund balance, you said, is?
Yeah, so we were 12 million, I believe, to the positive this year. Do you
No.
have that number over the last 5?
So I do have those numbers. Forgive me. And I do something, I shouldn't say I do something funny with my numbers because that doesn't sound appropriate, right?
We'll strike that from the minutes.
Thank-
Yeah,
thank you.
let's strike that from the
Strike
minutes,
that
please.
from the record.
Yes, sir.
We're not live streaming.
But what I do, Treasurer Bahorek talks about timing of
Sure.
payments, and we run into that problem as well.
Okay.
So if you look at my fund on a cash accounting standpoint from last school year, we lost $3.8 million. That's because I had a payment of $6,076,000 that didn't hit until right after the start of the fiscal year, because our payments come from the state. So I know that based on operations, we were a positive $2.2 million last year. So I make those adjustments in my records so that I can look for year to year, and it's a measure from you, as opposed to me losing $4 million this year and making $8 million this year and just having this thing that's all over the place. I make those adjustments, not in the official record, but in my records, so that I can keep track of that and see how we're trending realistically from year to year. But we have, so 5 years ago, right before we went to community eligibility, we lost about $300,000 that year, which may not sound good to this committee, but if you understand where we were prior to that, that was a remarkable year, and we were very proud of that year, because we were losing multiples, $2 to $3 million a year prior to that point. We made a lot of changes. After that, we went in, community eligibility came in. With community eligibility, we saw an increase in participation, as well as us working better, continuing to work on our financials. The next year, we made $3.5 million. The year after that, it was $4.3 million. Now, since then, that number's declined. And last year, we made $2.2 million. And I'll tell you, the primary driver of that number of declining, when we were losing money, we were making little to no investment into our facilities. Be it equipment, be it staff, whatever the case may be. We were in a break-fix mode. If something was broken and you had to fix it to be able to take care of kids, you fixed it to take care of kids. Now we invest. We were driving 20-plus-year-old trucks around. We haven't replaced our whole fleet, but we've replaced part of our fleet. We've bought new ovens for our staff. These types of things have done a ton to improve the quality of food we provide kids, as well as improve staff satisfaction.
Could you speak to me about the process by which this year's 12 million will be used to improve your operations and quality of food?
So the whole 12 million won't necessarily be invested this year, but so we continue to invest in our facilities. An example, when we started investing in our facilities a couple of years ago, we fixed a lot of ovens, standalone refrigerators, milk coolers, and something like that, which is, it's a big deal. The 1 year, it kind of hit me. 1 year I bought 40 milk coolers when we started doing this stuff. And 40 sounds like a pretty big number, doesn't it, for milk coolers? It did, and I thought, and come to next year, and I'm getting told, well, you know what, we probably need 40 more. And I'm like, I just bought 40, how do I need 40 more? Well, we have over 400. So if I buy 40 every year, I still have 10-year-old milk coolers out there. So it's that constant investment that needs done. But, so in the beginning, we tackled some of the easier things.
Yes, sir.
Milk coolers are easy. They're on wheels, they come and they roll them right off the dock, they, bring them in. Just last month, we were working with our capital improvements team, and we had a company come in and do an assessment of all of our walk-ins in our schools. And right now, they're doing an assessment. They did the assessment, we're waiting on the results to come back so that we can prioritize those to have our walk-ins redone and refurbished within our schools. Because frankly, some of our walk-ins are still made out of wood. Some of them they work with a lot of tender loving care, but they need to be upgraded. They need to be improved. So we're taking and we're looking at those types of things. That's a win for the students. That's a win for our staff. Those are the kind of things that we should always be looking at and always be doing moving forward. We ran into a time where we didn't do that for a long time.
My last question for you would be around purchasing local food. And I'm sure that we're, trying our best to do that. But can you speak a little bit about how we are spending the resources that we have locally to make sure that we get fresh produce and providing fresh fruits and vegetables to our students?
Absolutely. So starting, I think it's been 3 years ago, we started a program called Ohio Days, My Plate, My State, where we started providing local meals for our students. And there's really two ways we do that. On a monthly basis, once a month, and forgive me, because we have our LEDE program, which defines local in a certain way. That definition was too narrow for us to be able to buy food and to look at how we can. So we define local as something that's grown, raised, or processed in the state of Ohio. So we have an Ohio Day tomorrow, in fact, where we have turkey from Bowen and Landis, which is out in Springfield. We have sweet potatoes, which we got from Yellowbird Water Farms, which I can't remember exactly where they are. So on a monthly basis, we do things, we provide an all-Ohio meal in every one of our schools. We also learn from that, and sometimes those items are a little more expensive, but we sit there and we look at them and we try them, and depending on student acceptability and cost, if the students really like them, then we go back to them and say, okay, the students really like this. How can we work this into our regular menu cycle? And we sometimes find things that we can incorporate into our regular menu cycle. To a small company that's local, I shouldn't say they might be. In general, they're happy having a menu day a year, and at a time they can highlight their products and use it in our schools. They would certainly like to do it more often than that, and we try to find ways to be able to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. An example that we might run into, say their regular product is a little higher in sodium than we want to use for our students. Well, for a day, we can do that. We can provide that product for a day. But if we're going to incorporate that product into our regular menu, it needs to fall in line with our federal standards and how that's going to line up. So in that case, we might go back to them and say, hey, we really like your product, the price is right. We need you to reduce your sodium percentage by 25%. And sometimes they might be, you know what, let's go back and look and figure out if there's a way we can do that. Other times they might be like, you know what, this is our product and we own this and we're proud of it the way it is. We don't really want to do that. And if that's the case, that's fine. That's their product or prerogative as a business owner. But we have those discussions and try to figure out how we can help each other.
Board Member Brown?
Yes. I did have a couple questions, but one of them has just been asked and discussed, was about fresh and local. And those trends exist in the restaurant business in a big way.
They do.
And, how they apply here. So thank you for that. I would be curious to see if we've developed any goals about expanding or increasing, I guess, the number of Ohio Days or those kinds of things. If can't do it all at once, can't necessarily do it in a real big way, but incrementally, I would think that we could
We still have some challenges around not so much the center of the plate items, the accompaniments, the fruits and vegetables, because Ohio, August, September, it's not too bad. Last year in May, we were able to get fresh asparagus because asparagus was ready early. Those months were pretty good. Those winter months, sweet potatoes and aren't always the most popular items with our kids. So those, and we don't want to serve the same thing over and over again. So that's where we've struggled a little bit in finding additional alternatives to be able to do it more. We would like to do it more, but until we feel like we have a big enough menu pool to be able to do that and do it well, right now we're sticking with the once a month.
Thank you. The other question has to do with, I guess, we've got huge diversity in this district, culturally and in lots of other ways. And kids are coming from different food experiences that they've had. How do we address that? Does every building serve the same menu, or are there variations? And are there, I guess, greater demands in some schools, some buildings, for certain kinds of things?
So every building does serve the same menu. And in large part, that's from a purchasing perspective. If you're a restaurant chain and you have over 100 restaurants, which we do, and they're all serving different menus, it's near impossible to manage. So from a management standpoint, it's much easier for us to manage if we have consistency. And that way, when my supervisors go from one school to the next, they know that this is supposed to look like this here and here, as opposed to different from one school to another. We do try to address that diversity, though. When I first started here, for example, in our elementary schools, we had one choice a day for students. There was a hot pack and a cold pack. So saying a choice is probably an overstatement. But that was what was for lunch on that given day. And if a student liked it, great. And if they didn't like it, great as well, I guess. Well, since then, we've done more to increase options. We have 3 options every day in the elementary schools, as well as a fresh fruit and vegetable offerings bar. We have 5 options in the middle school, 7 to 8 options in the high school. And in that, we address some of that diversity. I talked earlier about our menu and how we make menu choices, and sometimes it's the least popular reason or item. Some of those diversity issues, though, might be why we may not take something off the menu, even though it may be closer to the bottom, is because we know there might be a certain population within our district that really enjoys that item.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we can continue on, because I want to definitely get through your piece. We've got several others to go through, and I definitely want us to make sure we're sticking as well to the cost implications, the fiscal aspects of this discussion, where I certainly appreciate the clarity and understanding around some of the other project or programmatic aspects of it, but thank you.
And just to keep it in perspective, this is the financial breakdown, this is the budget, this is the, a pie chart here, if you will, of the $35 million that's appropriated annually for the food service operation. Obviously, very close, but salary and benefits, personnel represent 44%, and then the next big item you would expect is the food itself, which is this under supplies and materials for the other 42%. So you can kind of see what the distribution of that budget is.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Ed O'Reilly is coming up to talk about the Adult Education Fund. This is obviously the for adult education core classes that we offer for obviously students that are of the adult age that are beyond 18. With that, I will turn it over to Ed.
I just wanted to see if food services giving out loans to the other enterprise funds.
No competition at all.
Adult Education Fund 012 compromises or composed several different pieces. The biggest of that is maybe is one of the best kept secrets in Columbus, which needs to not be a best kept secret. We have a practical nursing program that's been in existence for 66 years, and many people aren't aware of that program. That is a post-secondary program that is governed by the Ohio Department of Higher Education. So we offer a one-year program, tuition-based. It costs about $16,000 for that one-year tuition. When you finish that program, pass your national test, you are certified to be a licensed practical nurse, which right now in Columbus is about the $39,000 to $41,000 range. So this is a game changer for students. So the biggest portion, the largest number of students that fall under the 012 money are our practical nursing students. That program is not only accredited through the Ohio Department of Higher Education, it's accredited through the Ohio Board of Nursing, and it's also nationally accredited through the Council of Occupational Education. Because it's accredited at a national level, we get Perkins money. And along with that Perkins dollars becomes the ability for students to get Pell Grants and federal financial aid. So about 80% of our students have complete financial aid to go through the program. So they get about $7,000 of that tuition through Pell Grants, and the remainder they get through federal student loans. So how does that program do? I can tell you right now that ODHE released a recent report. There are 8 schools of practical nursing in central Ohio. We had the highest passage rates of all of them. That counts Hondros and Mount Carmel and Columbus State Community College. So we're doing very well. We just got the recent the test results back from this past fall. Of the eligible students who took the test, 100% passed the national test. So my staff is fantastic. So some other ways we receive money. Through Ohio, there's a Center for Training Excellence grant that's about $25,000, and that's to help develop customized training. So this might look like this. We're working with Nationwide Children's Hospital right now. They came to us with a problem that they thought we could help them with. They have a lot of people in their housekeeping department that have language acquisition skill issues. They're new to the country, so they're starting in housekeeping. So they asked us, not only could we train them in English, but could we provide some of the vocabulary they need for the next job up, so that they can qualify within the hospital. They retain, move to a higher level job. So we just finished our first run at that past fall. 24 students graduated from that program. So the goal there is they're going to move up in the hospital ranks, and then the next step would be, well, let's help them on the next step. So through our English as a Second Language program, we were able to customize that specifically to the hospital needs and provided that training right at the hospital site. So that's the kind of things we do with that money, develop that curriculum. Again, I talked about Perkins grant because we have all those accreditations, we do get money for Perkins. And then we also have an online program that many people don't know about. Some companies will call us and say, hey, some of our staff need training in Microsoft Office. Do you have anything online? Well, we are a local online provider. They call us, they pay us. We pay a fee to the company, but then we get some money from that company back. And so that program grew this past year by 300%. So, we're making money for the program in that way as well, just by providing some online training for companies throughout Central Ohio. We also, another thing that we really need to get out to our folks is what's called the Adult Diploma Program. And I don't know how much you know about the Adult Diploma Program, but if you are 22 years or older, and you don't have a diploma or your high school equivalent. I call it high school equivalency. A lot of folks call it GED. GED is a test. High school equivalency is the certification that you receive. So if you don't have one of those two, you're 22 years or older, and you're maybe extremely credit deficient. Say, at 15 years old, you had to leave high school for a variety of reasons. You can come to us, and you first pass WorkKeys. WorkKeys is a work and career readiness test. And then we train you in the state-tested nursing assistant. It's an 80-hour program. You pass that test, you pass your WorkKeys, you get your STNA certificate, and the state grants you a high school diploma. Game changer? Absolutely. For somebody who had to leave high school for a variety of reasons, credit deficient, this gets them into the workforce with a work skill, and we've been very successful with STNA. Not the numbers we'd like, but that. And then how do we get money from that? Every time we certify somebody with an adult diploma, the state reimburses us between $2,000 and $4,000, depending on how many hours the program is. Right now, it's STNA, but we really want to grow that to many more other certifications. STNA works well for students because it's 80 hours. A construction program might be 400 hours, so that creates some barriers for some of those students. But we really want to expand.
Just a moment, Mr. O'Reilly. This is a great opportunity, Madam Superintendent, for us to expand the partnership, for us to add value to these types of programs through partnership. I ran the J. Ashburn Junior Youth Center on the west side for a couple of years. I welcomed this program into my facility and made it available to folks in the community to actually kind of build capacity. And we had some measure of success with that. So organizations are we are constantly looking for space throughout the city to be able to create these opportunities for adult learners. So I think this is another leverage point for us when we're talking about partnership in the community. But thank you for that, Mr. O'Reilly.
Certainly. So the other part of our program, which doesn't fall in this fund, that I just want you to be aware of, is our Aspire program, and that is our high school equivalency program and our English as a second language program. That program serves 1,500 students a year. A lot of students come through that program, and that is grant funded. So that, again, that's a self-sustaining program as well. So a lot of good things going on in adult education. I do want to share with you, though, that in 2005, there were 14 workforce development programs in 5 different buildings. Today, there are 2 workforce development programs in 2 different buildings. So with all the discussion throughout Central Ohio right now of workforce development and the need for that, I think adult education can fill a void, and we're going to be working towards that as a goal throughout this year.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you.
And then here's obviously the same look that you'll see for the adult ed program as that you saw for food service. The annual budget for adult ed is $3.3 million, and they had a carryover fund balance of just over $685,000, so representing about 21% of that. So doing a really, really great job with this. Next, I will call up Rochelle Wilkerson to talk about our Latchkey Fund. And as I had mentioned before, this is our before and after school programs that we run.
Good afternoon. For those of you that haven't met, my name is Rochelle Wilkerson. I'm the supervisor for the Division of Early Childhood and Latchkey. I'd like to give you just a few highlights about our program. We began in 1982 with only 2 buildings. We've now grown to provide high-quality, affordable before and after school care in 22 programs across the district. Our program is a structured extension of the school day, with our teachers having lesson plans that promote social, emotional, physical, and intellectual development of our students. That also includes a 30-minute homework time where our students have the opportunity to have support by staff to complete homework. Our current enrollment is very fluid. We run anywhere from 850 to 900 students weekly. We're licensed by ODE and adhere to a 1:18 ratio. Our program, which is a recent development, has started participating in the Step Up to Quality program. For those of you that are not familiar, Step Up to Quality is a 5-star quality rating and improvement program that recognizes programs that exceed quality licensing for health and standard regulations. 13 out of our 22 programs have been visited, and I'm proud to say that all programs that have been visited have been rated 4 stars or higher. Another highlight of our program is that, and really makes us different than most after-school programs, is that our teachers are more highly qualified. All of our teachers have 4-year degrees, and they're licensed with the state of Ohio with ODE. Our IAs have 2-year degrees, and they have, or the equivalent, and they have to pass the Parapro program. Just like our classroom staff and buildings, our staff are required to complete their yearly professional development, and they're also certified in CPR, child abuse, first aid, communicable diseases, et cetera. We operate from 7 a.m. Before school, and we finish at 6 p.m. at the end of the day. We have an extremely affordable fee structure. Our fees are $55 per week for AM care only, $60 per week for PM care because the PM is a little bit longer than our morning session, and then $75 a week for both AM and PM. Approximately 29% of our students do receive publicly funded child care benefits. The other 70% pay out of pocket. And we're really excited to have this program because we have been able to provide this service without a fee increase for almost 13 years. We did have our first fee increase last year with 18-19, and we only increased by $5 in the morning, $10 in the afternoon, and $10 for both AM and PM. So we're extremely proud that we can offer this level of service at such an affordable rate to our families. The last really highlight is that we've been able to partner with Local Level this year to provide our families with the opportunity to pay their fees online. So this has been a pilot program, and the response has been extremely positive. And so we hope to roll that out to all 22 programs by the end of this school year.
Are they, Mr. Brown? Or was it, no, excuse me, Mr. Ragland?
He can go.
Mr. Ragland.
I didn't have a question. Oh.
Mr. Ragland.
Certainly, thank you. So, thank you for mentioning Step Up to Quality. Are we in line with the state standards so that by July 1st, all of our centers will be quality rated and we'll be good to go with all of our centers, the 22 centers that we have around the district?
Yes, yes. All of our programs, except for 6, have been visited by ODE. As a matter of fact, as far as our preschool programs, some of them are in their 3rd year of being Step Up to Quality rated, and they're being revisited and again being rated at that same high quality level.
Thank you. My question is around the 22 locations themselves. Where are we, what does the typical school look like? What are the demographics of the school the schools where we have latchkey programs? Are they just kind of sporadic, just kind of where we can see a critical mass of families that are coming in, or were we strategic in saying, here's where we need to have these? Can you kind of explain a little bit of that?
We have our programs, they are generated by building interest, by parent participation. So in order for us to start a program, we have to have at least 25 families that are interested in having the program there. Because most of these families are working families, the demographics of those schools are middle to higher income. And it's very surprising to most that only 30% of our families do qualify for publicly funded childcare because they're usually working families who require that before and after school care.
My last question is around the academic program, and do we have or do we track any data that show that our latchkey students are performing at a higher level as far as state testing is concerned, based on some of the added intervention that they get in our before and after school programs?
You know, we have not looked at that data to see if our latchkey program is making an impact on our academic achievement, but that's something that I would be interested in. Since moving to the Step Up to Quality program, we do have a more structured curriculum for our after-school program that would provide us a little bit more of a baseline to see how that is impacting academic achievement across the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'm using that to rope back around to finance, because if we can show that we're making gains academically with our students who are participating in our latchkey program, that can be a marketing tool for us. Absolutely. For more families to consider our latchkey options. I know that our families go to multiple areas, our students go to multiple areas when they leave the school, but if we can say that, you know, here's some clear definition of academic success that in large part can be associated to the increased program that we have before and after school, we might can then say to parents, hey, listen, here's another tool in the toolbox for you to use. It's not just babysitting, or it's not just an hour or so before and after school. Your students are getting a lot of enrichment from that. Dr. Dixon, would you at least consider looking into a mechanism by which we may be able to track our students in latchkey?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, very well. Any other comments, questions?
Financial information here, obviously. With the before and after school program, 98% of this is people. This shouldn't be a big surprise. But the overall fund is just over 1.9 million that we budget each year for this. They did end last fiscal year with a cash balance of just over $212,000, so we're doing pretty well. But to do what they did for so long without a fee increase was absolutely unbelievable. And still produce the quality and the results that we expect. So we've talked about it. We don't necessarily hope that we go another 13 years, but we're continually evaluating this so that if we see things are headed that way, that we would potentially come back to the board. And I can't remember if we brought that through FAC the last time or not, but looking at that as potential fee increases if necessary in the future.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, just one question that occurs to me after hearing a couple of these presentations. Given the importance the last several years and obviously ongoing with the step up and the quality and the need to get people up to speed, and there are still many providers, not us, but many others, who are struggling with that. I'm wondering if combination of your programs and the adult education programs might be able to do something for all of those other providers in terms of, offering education to providers that can help them do what they need to do, benefiting the kids that are coming to our schools.
And that's a wonderful concept, because I actually thought in part we were doing that. I recall under Dr. Good at the time that he was here, and this was really getting its wind under its sails, so to speak. A lot of that was happening in some measure in our Linden Center, where we were providing those resources for folks who needed that training and development. Is that still accurate?
And that was a goal that we're working towards at Linden Park, yes.
Okay.
Most of the partnership that's happening right now is within our pre-K program. We partner very closely with our community providers. We understand as a district, we can't provide service to all 5,000 kindergartners that are coming to Columbus City Schools. But it's really important for us to partner with these other community agencies so that every child is receiving that high-quality pre-K education before they come to us. So a lot of our training, Linden Park, for example, is our model program where we have 2 community providers on site with us. But beyond that, we're also working with various local community providers, Action for Children, in order to promote that partnership and that reciprocal training, because we don't know everything, and we also appreciate the support of our community providers and what they can bring to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I can certainly speak very quickly as a testament to the teachers that work in our Latchkey program. My children came through that system, and we utilized it at our home, and it paid tremendous dividends in their preparedness, I believe, in class engagement, and even the dialogue that happened on the family level to say, Washington may be dealing with this, or Bill might be dealing with that added some additional texture for us at home to be a little more on point with their studies. So thank you for your work, and I still remember your work from Georgian Heights too, so yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And to wrap this up, Scott Varner is going to come up and talk about the radio station, WCBE, and the operations, oops, wrong clicker. There we go. All right.
Good afternoon. So, as Mr. Gooding shared, Columbus City Schools does benefit from having a public radio station, WCBE. Just to give you a little history, because I think the history of the station helps kind of put us in place to where we're at today in some of our financial pictures. So, WCBE, the CBE stands for Columbus Board of Education, launched 65 years ago, 1956, and it was originally established as an educational tool, airing shows probably 1 to, I think, about 5 hours a day, actually broadcast from the offices on the other side of this floor. In 1970, we became an NPR, one of the original members of National Public Radio, and now we are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week station. Let me fast forward to a couple of decades to the early 2000s, and some may remember this a little better than I, but basically in those early 2000s, the administration at the time, the Board of Education, made a determination that WCBE should be more self-sustaining, that funding would not come from support of the general fund, but would instead come from underwriting, which is public radio's version of advertising. It would come from membership and direct donations. It would come from grants. To give you a sense of what those grants look like, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, federal dollars, that's about $126,000 each year that comes to the station. So instead of receiving direct general fund support, the station would become self-sustaining. Much like the first time I tried to stand up to my dad, and he said, "While you live under my house and I pay your bills, you'll follow my rules." I think there was a mindset at that time that began to develop at WCB that they started paying their own bills, and so kind of felt a divide from the district. And I say that because I think that that divide fueled a transgression that we discovered almost exactly a year ago this month, where we discovered that the station owed National Public Radio about $800,000. We were at risk of losing our membership and no longer having the ability to air National Public Radio programming because of years of unpaid bills that were hidden by the station manager. Now, I'm happy to answer questions about that investigation and really the work of our Office of Internal Auditor if you want, but keeping to Mr. Cole's word and keeping it really focused on the work of this committee, let me instead focus kind of on the finances behind. What we implemented was the WCB Stabilization and Reimagination Plan that was launched by the administration last spring, shared with the board at the time. First and foremost, what the plan did was recognize that the current operating model at WCB just no longer was working, that revenue from membership, underwriting, grants, those donations simply did not cover the full expense of operating the radio station as it currently was structured. Now, to give a very high level number, if you think operation of that station currently is about $1.5 to $1.6 million, that current revenue is about $800,000 to $900,000. That's a gap. But more importantly, there were also, well, just as important, there were also questions about, and really some concerns about how the operation of the station fit within the district's academic mission. How did it align with the superintendent's strategic plans? And how, if or how, do we give our students more access and maybe even more airtime as part of the educational efforts of having a radio station? So there were two parts, stabilization and reimagination. First, the administration would stabilize the station. No major changes in programming or how the station worked for a year. That would first require us paying that bill to National Public Radio. So in FY19, the board made a transfer, an investment, as I like to say, of $870,000 to WCBE. During the current fiscal year, WCBE is maintaining its normal fundraising so that we work to achieve those dollars that we bring in every year, and where possible, look for more dollars. I never turned down a gift to the station, but it was anticipated that there would likely be an additional need for a transfer and investment of general funds. Now, admittedly, I thought this stabilization piece would be rather quick, that it was just a matter of paying for some of those bills. But it really has taken us a good year to best understand the full costs and needs of operating that radio station now that there's full sunlight into how that operation goes. Just this month, we completed our audit for our annual financial report that's required by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting if we want to get more money from them in the future. And we are nearing completion of an investigation by the Inspector General from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting out of Washington. And that report should probably be done in the next couple of months. But to give you a financial sense, our fall fund drive went well. Currently, our overall revenue is about $15,000 ahead of where we were at this time last year. One of the changes we continue to see is a shift to sustaining memberships. So instead of someone calling in and saying, I pledge $100, they pledge $10 a month. Now, it's a double-edged sword, as you know, because you don't suddenly get $100, but you do get $10 a month, and if it's for a full year, that's $120. So you actually get more, and those credit cards remain in our system until someone changes it, and so you hope that some of those sustaining memberships last much longer than a year. Our spring fund drive is set for the third week of March, and again, with that, we're hoping to remain on track. We just put in place a new interim station manager who is doing a great job. So I probably feel more stabilized than I have at any other time in the past 12 months since this began to give us some of that better financial picture. So let's move on to the second part of that plan. That's the reimagination. And I know this is kind of outside the finances, but I think it, again, is important to look at because it will impact the financial picture in the moving forward, because it asks the question, what should the operation of the station look like moving forward? I believe there is consensus that the license for the station holds value, that piece of paper that we get from the FCC, because they simply aren't granting new radio stations, if at all, anymore. Now, it should be pointed out that that license that we have, because of where we're at on the radio spectrum, we're at 90.5, we're at the far end. Those are reserved for nonprofit public radio or religious programming, so we can't be the next top 40 commercial station. So if we ever were to choose to sell that license, know that there's a limited amount of people out there who would really consider purchasing it. But that piece of paper, that FCC license, does have value. But we know that significant changes need to be made to the station, and that includes an honest discussion about even potentially outsourcing the operations of the station. But there's really not a consensus yet on exactly what those changes should be, and to this committee's work, how best to pay for them. For instance, what should the station's priority be when it comes to student involvement? Should WCB be more of an educational tool like it was when it had 5 hours of educational programming a day? Or should it be more of a community asset that it tries to be today, or both? What does that look like? And how best should the station be funded? I've spent much of the last 12 months, in addition to stabilizing the work of the station, talking with experts and entities, both within radio, the radio industry, public radio experts, both locally and some nationally, interested parties, some of our external stakeholders, station staff, both current and former, and even the listeners. And I'm working currently with the head of communications, our chief communications officer, and the superintendent to really kind of gather and report back on that consensus. So I don't want to get ahead of that, but that's something I hope to update the board on soon. But let me say this, there are some things that we shouldn't wait for. So let me just share a couple of things. Because the superintendent and board will be asked to make an investment in the station again this year, there were some things I thought we should get for that. So we've actually implemented some changes at the station more recently to kind of bolster the district's benefit from the station. First off, if you listen at the top of each hour when they remind you what you're listening to, you will now hear that you're listening to 90.5 WCBE, a broadcast service of Columbus City Schools. So each hour we're reminding. It actually is even better if you tune into WCBE online or on your Alexa. If you say, Alexa, play WCBE, there's actually a brief message that says, WCBE is a broadcast service of Columbus City Schools. We've also started airing student music, finally. That was one of my wins. In fact, I just heard one this afternoon as I was driving back to to my office. It was one of our student performers from Fort Hays, an original song that she created. So we've been working with Fort Hays to actually get songs that are performed by students, in this case written by students, recorded by the audio engineering students that are at Fort Hays. So these are student performed and produced, being brought over to air on the broadcast on the station. We're also working with our communications department to find other ways that we can create kind of some preferred PSAs so that when there are messages from the district, they get some preferred time slots to be aired, as well as kind of a district underwriting package, some advertising. We'll also be looking at kind of updating the website for WCBE to include more news about the district. And maybe even looking at some other times where we can dedicate airtime more to some of those messages that come from the district to increase that benefit. So from a financial perspective, we are in some cases ahead of where we were last year, but recognize that we are still best understanding the full cost of operating the station.
And because we do have a hard stop at 6, I want to make sure we give everybody opportunity to ask their questions, but try and move this along fairly quickly. It's not purposeful. It's just intentful. Yes, Mr. Gragman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my biggest dreams would be that we utilize our athletics department in terms of content that would go onto the radio station. And there's an academic component to this. We do, I still believe we have a radio and TV component at Fort Hays that we are operating where students are learning broadcasting. That just seems to me like a bonanza for our potential underwriters, a Columbus City Schools Game of the Week type of environment that the game is being broadcast by students who are being trained on this precise activity at Fort Hays. It allows for local corporations and even national corporations to have an audience that would probably be student-centered, that would be engaged in hearing, the game itself, but then also the before and afters, the, player interviews and those types of things. It seems to me like we've got at least some content that we can put a couple of times a week that could draw some interest from some underwriters who would like to have a captive audience of students and families with our athletics department. When will the report be presented to the board is my question.
I'm sorry, when will the report be presented to the board?
that you're
Again, I didn't want to get ahead of conversations with the superintendent and the chief communications officer.
Understood, Mr. Farmer.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you so much for what we're seeing in terms of the work that has been done stabilizing the district and the WCBE, the station. And it's certainly, because I listen to it frequently. So I actually see the difference in the change. So thank you for your work, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, think about it, on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock on your way home, it could be, finance fun with Stan.
We want
we're thinking
the
outside
show
the
to
box
have
here.
an end, right?
Advertising bonanza.
Right, we wanted to have an end. Mr. Varner, I also see an opportunity as well, just as a quick tidbit, with some sort of connection to adult learning as well. This is certainly a continual emerging industry where content across the board for television and radio are needed, and it's a competitive environment. So it's something that we can open the door for adult learners as well. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 5, which is the tax incentive proposal. Mr. Treasurer.
Okay, thank you. Knowing how much I'll have an open mic, if that's an offer to go on the radio, we can talk about that. Could be dangerous. But the next item on the agenda is a presentation by one of our partners, Nationwide Children's Hospital. And they have approached us several months, well, quite a few months ago, and we've been in discussions about this brand-new project of theirs. And Libby Wong with the hospital is here to start the presentation, talk about our ongoing partnership and their proposal for a brand-new project, which I believe was just announced Monday. I think there was an article, I don't know if there was any broadcast coverage, but I know there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch about a new medical manufacturing facility that they're going to be involved with. So I have seen and heard this presentation so much, I believe I could probably give it myself, but it is truly not only interesting, but a pretty amazing project that they have in mind that is unique and unlike any other project that involves an incentive that I've seen, and that we, as the committee and board heretofore has seen. So with that, I'll turn it over to Libby, and my apologies for not giving you the device to do your presentation, but this is Libby Wong with Nationwide Children's Hospital.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for your time over the past few months as we've given this presentation. So as Stan said, I'm Libby Huang. I serve as Vice President of Planning and Business Development at Nationwide Children's Hospital. We are not accustomed to coming in front of you as a non-for-profit requesting tax abatements because we don't pay taxes as a nonprofit. So we believe we have a unique case to tell you about today, as Stan alluded to. First, we're going to cover our current state of our partnership with Columbus City Schools. Then we'll talk about the spinoff company that Children's is establishing. And then we'll talk a little bit more specifics on the abatement request. So I will let Mary Kay introduce herself and her role and talk a lot about the current state of our partnership.
Good evening. So I am Mary Kay Irwin. I am Director of School Health Services at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Probably also relevant to share with you that I'm an educator. Started my career as a teacher. I was in the classroom for 6 years, and then I transitioned into pediatric healthcare, where I have spent the last 15 years focused on school health integration. So I am going to begin by explaining why this partnership that we have between our two institutions is a priority to NCH. So the first is this acknowledgement that health and education are dynamically intertwined. So such that students who are healthy are in a better position to learn and therefore achieve more. And we also know that those that achieve more tend to enjoy a more overall healthy life. The second reason is that the children who are at the core of our partnership, they are your students, they are also our patients, and collectively they make up our community's future. And we really do share that same goal to achieve outstanding outcomes for the children in our community. I also want to reference this diagram over here to talk about this dynamic. So across the country, we know that we have an increasing number of children who are experiencing chronic disease, and they're coming to school with more healthcare needs. And there are very few places in the school environment that are poised and ready to handle those increasing health needs, which then creates this dynamic where students' outcomes are at stake. So this is one of the reasons why NCH invests so heavily in this partnership. This really does not do our partnership justice, but for the sake of brevity, we are two institutions. For those of you that don't know, we have really been partners for a very long time. But in 2015 is when Nationwide Children's actually brought me here to Columbus to really expand the partnership that we have with Columbus City Schools and make it really comprehensive. And so I'm going to give you a very brief highlight of what that partnership entails. But this diagram really shows where that investment began, and then it has grown every year since. So the first thing I want to talk about is primary care. So we offer primary care to your students 2 ways. We have 2 mobile units that travel to approximately 20 of your schools, and then we have 11 school-based health centers that we have actually inside your school buildings. Anywhere where we are providing primary care, the first thing to know is that Columbus City School students from anywhere in the district are welcome to come, and we are seeing students from all different buildings in our school-based health centers, for example. The other thing to know is that we provide comprehensive primary care. So anything you can have done at a doctor's office, we can do here. So we do things from the acute care side, which is strep throat and ear infections, to sports physicals, to comprehensive well exams, immunizations, and really help with chronic disease management. We also, excuse me, in partnership with your staff at Colerain Elementary School, we offer the wheelchair clinic. So you have more than 70 kids at Colerain Elementary School that, thank you.
Just in case.
Yes, thank you. That are in wheelchairs. And so there was a great need to partner with Colerain Elementary School. So what we actually do is we bring the entire medical team to Colerain in the wheelchair vendors, and we were able to operate the wheelchair clinic there. It's been an absolutely fantastic partnership. We also have the school-based asthma therapy program. So this program is focused on children with really out-of-control asthma. So these would be your students who are missing school with regularity or coming to your school nurses and can't get through recess without their rescue inhaler. And on our side, they're coming to our emergency room and they have inpatient stays. So these are pretty sick kids. And the common denominator that we find with these children is that most often they are not taking their prevention medication. So what we do is bring the school nurse into the fold, and with parent permission, she starts to administer the prevention inhaler to the children with regularity. And the return on investment in this program is really, truly amazing. So we are seeing improvement in attendance. We are seeing a decrease in emergency room and inpatient stays. And children who are saying things like, I now get it. I know what this prevention inhaler is, and I'm remembering to do it on my own. We have over 350 of your students in this program in almost every single one of your schools. Then we have our school-based behavioral health work. So we layer our work in the very familiar pyramid where you all are used to doing your Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 services. So our Tier 1 services are evidence-based prevention programming that we would offer to an entire population, defined by a classroom as a population, maybe a grade or a school, and the types of programs that are evidence-based prevention are listed in the bullets. A Tier 2 intervention would be group therapy that we offer at the school setting. And then Tier 3 is the one-on-one therapy with the NCH behavioral health specialist in your school. At the point that we're at Tier 1, we are definitely engaging the parents and also doing some home visits. We have the direct therapeutic services in 50 of your buildings and prevention all over your district. We also offer these teen health education programs. So this is engagement that we do with your students, with your teachers, school nurses. We'll do train the trainer. We'll host evening events and bring parents in. And the goal of this is to really address sometimes difficult topics that are health related, to teach about health promotion and wellness and how to access services. So this has been very successful. And then we also offer a series of student experiences. So the first one is our Spark program. So we enroll 80 children in the South Side region in the Spark program. And so this is a program that we focus on 4-year-olds and preparing them for kindergarten. And our educators go into the home and teach that parent to be the child's first and best teacher. We provide them with resources and get them ready for kindergarten. The children who participate in our Spark program are doing exceptionally well on the KRA and are doing well all the way up into 3rd grade. We now have data to track them. We also offer mentorship programs. So we have over 250 Nationwide Children's Hospital employees that are serving as mentors in your district, and they are in several of your buildings, and then also Boys and Girls Club and a few other places like that. And then we are the only, to our knowledge, the only pediatric healthcare institution that has ever been awarded an Upward Bound Math and Science grant. So we are very proud of this. We enroll 60 of your students annually, and these are students who are first-generation college, and their home school is Marion, Franklin, or South, so they don't have to attend, but that would be their home school. And we provide a myriad of experiences for these kids. So we are interacting with these children 2 and 3 times a week, offering free tutoring and mentoring. And then in the summer, we have a very comprehensive program that is 6 weeks long. They stay at Ohio State for a week. We take them on college tours. We do internships, job readiness skills, all sorts of things. And you can see the outcomes of these kids. So they're just doing very well, getting accepted to college. So we're very proud of this partnership. We also have the I3 initiative. So this is in partnership with Columbus State South High School, I Know I Can, and we, in this capacity, serve as the employer partner, and we provide job shadowing experiences and job internships for the children in this program. And then we have our residents in schools. So these are our medical residents that partner with 4 of your buildings, and they actually provide health education instruction every year for a total of over 4,000 instruction hours per year. So we do bill for some of these services. You can probably figure out which ones are not billable, but we do bill for some of these services. But when you think about all the expenses and what actually comes back after billing, we operate at a little over a $3 million loss a year to provide these services in the district. I'm going to turn it back over to Libby.
So I will note that there is a handout at the desk back there, and I think you have them in front of you, but that explains what services we have in what schools. So there's a map to the schools. We are working with Dr. Dixon to enhance this even further for the next academic year. So let's talk about this spin-off company a little bit. To start with some background, Nationwide Children's Hospital has developed a way to deliver life-changing gene therapy for children. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a genetic disease that progressively degenerates the muscles of the body. It leads to the inability to walk and results in a shortened lifespan. So what you see here in this video on the left is a patient climbing up the stairs. He can barely make it 4 stairs, and then he collapses in exhaustion. His progression of the disease, this child's condition would worsen and eventually have led to an earlier death. In the right-hand video, 6 weeks post-therapy, he makes it up the stairs very well. So notably, the damage that has occurred prior to treatment is not irreversible. So the earlier we treat these patients with gene therapy, the better off the patients are. Dr. Jerry Mendel and other scientists at Nationwide Children's brought the first 2 gene therapy treatments to market. And through the research process, they made a cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spinal muscular atrophy patients. Spinal muscular atrophy, notably, is typically diagnosed early in life and leads to death by the age of 2. So gene therapy, a little background on what gene therapy is a treatment which modified DNA is created to replace faulty genes that have led to illness or fatality. Vectors, the gene goes into vectors that serve as the vehicles to deliver the DNA into the patient's body and into the patient's cells. The new DNA that arrives via the vector then corrects the faulty genes. And when Nationwide's Children's Scientific Team developed the 2 cures, they used a viral vector called recombinant adeno-associated virus. Much like your common cold creates illness, this virus works in a positive way. So their work on developing an effective vector has been transformational, as you can imagine, and it is that knowledge that we hope to leverage with this new facility. So again, the vector is really the Trojan horse that sneaks corrective DNA into the cells and the focus of this new biologics manufacturing company. So using this delivery vehicle, scientists and physicians around the world will be able to treat diseases like those listed here, sickle cell disease and Huntington's disease as 2 call-outs. So gene therapy being developed around the world has shown so much promise to curing debilitating and fatal diseases, the demand is increasing really fast and is expected to triple in the next 5 years. Exciting place to be. So yes, manufacturing of gene therapy is the most complex and resource-intensive process in biologics manufacturing, so not everyone is able to easily get into that business. So market conditions coupled with the children's expertise that has been developed makes for a really great opportunity for Columbus. It also means that Columbus will be seen as a leader, helping to bring life-changing treatments to the market for rare genetic diseases, curing children. So we believe this will also attract other scientific and pharmaceutical companies to Columbus as this industry grows, and that will be a great opportunity for the community. As a result of our knowledge and success in production of this viral vector and our desire to advance gene therapy that perhaps others have developed, we will create Andelyn Biosciences. The name Andelyn Biosciences represents a hybrid of 2 pioneering gene therapy patients who participated in pivotal phase 1 clinical trials. Can you imagine the courage those parents had? At the Abigail Wexner Research Institute. So Andrew Kilbarger, who is seen on the left here, was treated for Duchenne muscular dystrophy in 2006, and Evelyn Villarreal was treated at 8 weeks old when she received treatment for spinal muscular atrophy in 2015. Again, in the absence of treatment, the 2 children you see in these pictures that were taken fairly recently would not be alive today. So what is this company? It is a biologics manufacturing plant. And this sterile production facility will manufacture vectors specifically designed for specific diseases. Since Children's does not have a global distribution platform, the products will be sold to small pharmaceutical companies who then distribute and sell it to healthcare clients delivering the treatments. Because Nationwide Children's is a 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on healthcare, Andelin will be established as a for-profit, specifically for two reasons. Our work in the manufacturing field is unrelated business income, it's not healthcare. And it will sell services and products to companies that will use the vector as a vehicle for an array of novel treatments. Therefore, it's taxable, and the reason we're here today. So as I mentioned, it's a key reason we're seeking this abatement. The children's revenues from this company will be reinvested in the Nationwide Children's Hospital mission and vision, allowing us to reinvest in research and clinical care to create more life-changing treatments. So it is our aspiration to pursue best outcomes in children everywhere. In addition, Andelin itself will put an emphasis on rare diseases and orphan treatments that would otherwise not be picked up by big pharma companies because they're simply too small for big pharmaceutical companies to invest in manufacturing. So that's a little bit about what Andelin Biosciences is and will do. Our proposed location is at the corner of Lane and Carmack and is part of the OSU's West Innovation Campus. You can see in the red box at the top of the slide where that is located. It's a great opportunity to be part of the OSU West Innovation Campus. This land, because it is owned by OSU, is not taxed today and is generating no income for Columbus City Schools or the City of Columbus. So you finance folks get that, right? Which will change with the addition of the Andelin facility. So as a taxable entity, that will change and it will create new revenue. So it's also important to note that as we construct an approximately 100,000 square foot facility, that we know it's as important to us as it is to you to make sure we're contracting with minority and women-owned contractors. So this is a very specialized building with very few contractors who have the experience to develop these biologics manufacturing facilities. So we will require subcontractor bidding from minority and women-owned contractors, as we do with all of our projects. The new manufacturing company will take time to develop and build and validate, and therefore employees ramp up over time. So what you see in 2020, we will start with 66 FTEs and a payroll of $5 million. And that nearly triples by 2025, just as we're producing product for commercial production. The results, it results in an average salary of $77,000, and that grows over the years as inflation occurs. And the wage ranges from $15 to $91 per hour. Andelin, like Children's, will adopt the living wage minimum, so 15 would be the minimum. Over half of these positions can be filled with an associate degree, so you see the pie chart. It's a little bit small for you to read, but half of them can be filled with an associate degree. So could be completed during high school like many of our other programs. And it sounds like we have some opportunity to partner with Adult Services with that workforce development program. The validation step in late 2023 can last anywhere from 6 to 12 months to obtain FDA approval. During that time, we will produce product that is not commercially available. So we dispose of all the products that we create. This is the way the FDA can ensure that it's good, clean, pure product. Because of the timeline that it takes to get the facility up and running, you will note that we actually don't produce product until late 2024, possibly early 2025. So we have nearly $30 million of salaries alone and expenses where we're getting limited income. And thus the next reason for us being here and requesting the tax abatement. So the facility, if we talk about the details of the tax abatement, the facility costs us $64 million to construct. The property taxes on the building improvements due to Columbus City Schools would be $1.3 million annually for a total of $19.7 over that 15-year period. The net present value of that is $11.2 million. Because the land, again, is owned by OSU, it generates zero income today. the new net cash flow from land and income taxes, and you see the income taxes have a range of $115,000 to $800,000. Over the 15 years, we're continually ramping up FTEs, so that's why there is a range. But the projection would be $4.7 million of new tax revenue coming to Columbus City Schools. Mary Kay mentioned the student experiences during her presentation, and I just put this up as a reminder of our efforts, particularly enhanced since 2015. Children's is a very proud supporter of student initiatives related to STEM programs, mentoring, and college support. We'll continue to do that. She also reviewed our clinical partnership and services and in detail, so I won't go through all of that. But together with the student experiences mentioned in the previous slide, again, our in-kind is $3 million provided annually to Columbus City Schools. So we did meet with Alicia as part of this tax abatement request and her academic leadership team. And what they told us is that with our expertise and their needs, the biggest priority is to provide more primary care and especially more behavioral health services. So with that, we have agreed to expand to additional primary care and behavioral health services. So I put a little equation up here. And what you see here is in 2019-20, the services that we're providing valued at $3.2 million. We will be adding primary care and behavioral health services, at least 5 clinicians worth of services, spread to the schools where you have the biggest priorities for $330,000 annually. Together, that creates $3.53 million loss that children's experience, but investment in Columbus City Schools annually. And over that 15-year tax abatement, that equates to about $53 million. So in summary, our ask is for a 100% 15-year tax abatement valued at $19.7 million. What we're providing is $5 million of new children's services, that $330,000 per year. You'll have $4.7 million in additional revenue from taxes, for a total of $9.7 million. That, coupled with what we're doing today at $48 million, because we will not, stop our existing services, gives a grand total of that 15-year period of over $57 million. So I'd like to conclude with a final message that describes what I can't describe in words. And it's a short video, but you can see how gene therapy is really providing a different type of hope for families.
Spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA type 1, is the leading genetic cause of death for infants today. A devastating fact this family knows all too well.
Our first daughter, she was diagnosed with SMA type 1 at 6 months of age, and she passed away at 15 months old.
This is a disease that is devastating for infants. A large percentage of patients die before 1 year of age, but 95+% are gone, unfortunately, by age 2.
SMA rapidly robs babies of their ability to move, talk, swallow, and eventually breathe. When Milan and his wife Elena found out they were pregnant with their second child, Evelyn, they prayed for a healthy baby. Unfortunately, that was not the case.
When she was born and the results came back and found out she was positive for SMA type 1, and we both kind of just broke down. We found out about the clinical trial here at Nationwide Children's Hospital.
This is really the first time that we've been able to apply gene therapy to any neuromuscular disease.
Today was a very special day for Evelyn. She was given genetic therapy for her missing SMN gene.
Babies with SMA are missing a gene vital for development. Through a one-time injection, gene therapy replaces this missing gene. For Evelyn, this gene therapy worked.
We start seeing changes as early as 2 months after treatment.
She started to push, and she started to get more active, holding her head up. And a little after 3-4 months, she rolled over on her own.
Now 3-year-old Evelyn challenges Dr. Mendel to a dance-off at her annual follow-up appointment.
She comes back after 3 years and she runs up to me and hugs me and says, Dr. Mendel, I love you.
I forget that she has SMA. This is a healthy girl, and she does everything that a normal 3-year-old child would do.
Something like that has never been achieved before.
With our first daughter, it was just devastating to lose a child. You lose all dreams you had for their future. And now we can actually save for college.
So it's again hard to beat that video. May I answer any questions for you?
Any questions, committee?
It's game-changing. Thank you. I know that service is going to help so many kids in our community, and you're going to track a huge number of really high-quality people. So this is really a game-changer.
So, absolutely.
Anyone else? So is there a motion?
I can just speak to the timetable at this point. This is scheduled to, this presentation is scheduled to go to the board next week. Very similar, if not identical, presentation and discussion will be had by to the full board and by the full board. Subsequently, at the first meeting in February, we should have enabling legislation available for the board's consideration. This is all just like a regular incentive proposal. We're doing this in tandem with the City of Columbus. There are things that they have to do and we have to do collectively in terms of authorizing legislation. But we're on schedule for, February 4th board meeting to get the board's portion of that done. But that's how the schedule works. But we've been in conversations since before last summer up to this point. So there's been a lot of work done on both sides up to this point. So that's the schedule. I don't know that there's any resolution that is needed or requesting. I think those of you that are here, can speak to this Tuesday as well. So
Encouraged by not just what the medical benefit is projected to be for children and families, but also what the return on the investment is to the district. And it raises again the question of what folks do not understand about tax abatement. It is that the property tax, the value of what the asset is, may not be taxed over a certain term of time, but it does not negate the land being taxed first and foremost. In addition to that, this is again our opportunity to share revenue with the city, something that we've utilized under many other conditions because the state statute allows us to do that. So I'm also encouraged by what is our continued partnership. Thank you for your continued commitment to add value, saying we're going to give you, we're looking at another $300,000 investment in children in our district. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ragland.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I concur with my colleague here on that. One of the things that I would be interested in hearing at Tuesday's meeting is your thoughts with specificity on aspirational goals for the jobs themselves that will be created. Is there a commitment, and you don't have to answer this now, is there a commitment to make certain, or is there a goal that you set to make certain that the jobs that are created go to residents of Columbus proper? Meaning those that are inside of the outer belt, and with specificity, those that are residents of boundaries that are Columbus City Schools boundaries, i.e. our parents. Because we are dealing with an issue of major poverty from a lot of our student bodies and the families that they come from. I did hear you very clearly mentioning a potential partnership with our adult education department, and that is very encouraging to hear more around aspirational goals in that area would be keen for me, as well as specific goals that you have set with minority and women business inclusion at Tuesday's board meeting would be helpful for me in making my decision on this project. Understanding that articulating a desire to do work with minority and women business is different than setting an actual goal. And so if you all have talked about goals, that would be very important to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, and I want to say thank you again for visiting us today, giving us this presentation. We certainly look forward to this coming Tuesday and given this opportunity and maybe even having a more rich discussion. I thank you very much.
Thank you for having us today. Appreciate it.
All right. Understanding that there is a hard stop here.
There's nobody here yet for that meeting, so, but we only have one item left, so we're.
Okay, so
we're
you're
wrapping
okay
up.
with wrapping this up?
Yeah,
or-
this will
Okay.
take 2
All right.
seconds, really.
Okay.
And the next item on the agenda is simply to share with the committee the proposed meeting dates. It's set on the same schedule. It's that Thursday between the first and third Tuesdays of each month, so we meet right in between the board meetings. In the agenda online, in the details, I make several notes about times when, for instance, we have a hard stop because of another meeting some of us have to go to in March. We will meet during spring break at the district in the April 15th meeting. We don't plan on meeting in July. What was perfectly clear to me when I wrote on September 9th as a possible conflict for SB is me. My oldest son is getting married that week, and I'm not real sure what my involvement will be totally, but I may not be here. But I have two people to my right that just jumped up and said, "Oh, no, Stan, we'll cover for you." So those are the dates if you'd like to put them on your calendar. And other than that, I will follow this meeting up with Outlook invitations to all of you. I know that at the board meeting on Tuesday, the president will be announcing her appointments to committees, and pending that, I may have to make some changes with some folks, but we'll take care of that then.
Yeah.
So, but with all of you, I'll get you on the list for the meetings.
Thank you,
That's it.
Mr. Treasurer. Well, there's been a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay, Mr. Ragland and Ms. Johnson. All right. Mr. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Sure.
And Chair Cole?
Yes.
All right, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.